Right, what I'm going to do is first start by talking about what some definitions and what this debate is about and what it's not about. And so what we want to do in this debate is focus on actual disabilities that can be treated treated medically. So we're going to be talking about physical disabilities, and we're going to be talking about mental disabilities, and we're going to be talking about long-term disabilities and short-term disabilities. One thing that we want to exclude from the definition is things like gender. And so, for example, if you look at the definition and how you can say that there's some kind of social issues or social constructions that are leading to disability, we don't want to have this debate focus on, oh, society is like disadvantaging women, so women are going to be defined as disabled. So we want to deal with things that we can actually treat mentally. We want to deal with things that we can actually have some kind of medical treatment for. So we think it's fair that whatever we're talking about, social disability or physical or medical disability, that something includes something that can actually be treated mentally and if there's no medical treatment for it, we want to exclude that from the debate. All right, so let's talk about two different kinds of disabilities that we can deal with, physical disabilities and mental disabilities. So let's start talking about mental disabilities. So mental disabilities would be some kind of mental illness disorder. And we feel that it's the medical model of this treatment is superior over trying to change society, because that in terms of the actual ability for someone with a mental illness to fit into society better, it depends upon some kind of medical treatment. And so let's give an example over here. For example, we have someone with ADHD. And so we have a child with ADHD. Sometimes they're in this situation where they don't have control over their emotions. They're young, they're kids, and they have outbursts, and these outbursts in front of their kindergarten classmates, for example, will make people look at him and view him as a strange kid, this kid that you don't want to get along with. So let's see what happens if you try to change the societal impression that the kids in the class have. So the teacher is going to spend all this time trying to treat the other kids in the class and tell them, yo, you have to be welcoming, you have to be understanding of this kid, and you have to try to be their friends. But again, these are little kids. And they only have so much mental maturity, and they're not going to be the kind of people who are going to say, oh, you know, there's this weird kid, he's always screaming all the time, but we still want to be his friend. In the end, that kid is going to be an outcast, even if you're trying to do a lot of change, if you're trying to like teach the other children in the class to be very accepting of this kid. So now let's take a look on the other side if we treat this as a medical disorder. And so, first of all, you diagnose this child as having something like ADHD, and then you get him some kind of help. And so, first of all, you can get some kind of medication. And the medication can help him control his outbursts. And as he gains more control, then you put the onus on the child to learn to control himself as he's getting older. And as he gets older and he goes into new situations where you don't have the entire class taught by the teacher to be accepting of him, he's able to work in society, he's able to get along with kids, and he's able to make friends. And so we can see that the medical model here is superior to some kind of social model. And so, again, if we're taking a look at the impact over here, that you can't always focus all your energy on changing all of society for this one kid who has the mental illness. And then also, in the end, when you have people who aren't learning to either get the medication to help them, they're not getting better, and they're not learning to get better without the therapy and the medication. And so then they don't become productive members of society. So now let's take a look at the other side of things and take a look at the physical side of disability. And so when we're talking about physical side, you can have long-term disabilities, such as maybe someone has an accident and then they're paralyzed from the waist down. It can also include something short-term, such as you have an accident and you break your leg. And so when we're looking at the medical model, if we focus on the medical model, please.
So you say that you would have to change the whole society to accommodate children and accommodate people with mental disabilities. Would you say that you would then logically change the whole medical system to accommodate people who are with disabilities?
Oh, all right. So what I want to talk about here is this idea that if we focus upon medical disabilities, physical disabilities as something medical, then the whole medical system is already focusing on ways in order to strengthen them. And so, for example, if we focus on medical disabilities, then you have research that's going into it, for example. And so someone who's paralyzed, if we put like effort into changing or improving someone's physical disability, then you're doing research. And so right now you can see research on growing nerves, or research into using chips or whatever to put into your body that are able to stimulate nerves so that people are learning to be able to walk again, or people who are being able to move again. And so then you have this long-term research change or research improvement that's going on if you focus on medical disabilities and you focus on improving medical disabilities. So let's take a look and see what it would be like if you focus on the social change or societal changes in terms of physical disabilities. And then again, here it seems like you're trying to change people's attitudes towards disabilities. You're trying to say that people who are disabled should be treated in a more friendly way or something like that. And so we don't see that there's going to be this long-term physical change that's actually going to help people. And so then again, we can also take a look at short-term disability. And so when you have this medical model of disability, you're looking at the infrastructure also. And so if you look at buildings like this, because we have this idea that there's a physical disability and we want to help people with physical disabilities, you see that buildings are remodeled. And so for example, right here, we have a new ramp that's built over here that's coming into this building. That's not something that was here when this school was built. And you see here at this university, for example, there are a lot more elevators that are put on, there are a lot more handicap ramps that are put in. And so people who are temporarily with disabilities are often able to manage and get around and get around themselves much more easily. And so basically what we're saying over here is that we show that if you focus on medical disabilities, it helps people who are mentally disabled and also physically disabled. And so for that reason, we are proud to propose.
Ladies and gentlemen, side of opening opposition do not deny the function or the benefits of having medicine. We agree to some extent medicine is useful. But then we think there's a real crux of today's debate is, as a disability rights movement, how should they, as a social movement, position themselves in order to garner support and eventually and systematically help these people who are disabled? We think that this mechanism is lacking in opening government's case. But in my speech, I'm going to prove to you a few things. First of all, I'm going to prove to you why it's unjust to put the blame on these disabled individuals for their own disability. And second, I'm going to talk about how, under the social model, we understand that will actually create meaningful social changes and why is it effective. Before that, a few points of rebuttal. First of all, PM came out and talked about why changing social perception is hard, and he used the example of ADHD kids in the classroom. Ladies and gentlemen, we think that, yes, changing social perception is hard, but we can still see progress in the society. And not just that we can use in like the LGBTQ movement. Like in the past, like the right to get married in Taiwan wasn't legal in the past few decades. But after some social changes and lobbying, we can see that people towards towards the LGBTQ movement has changed, and even their legal right has been recognized. Therefore, we think that changing social perception is not really as hard as opening government has characterized. But even if there are kids in the classroom that will laugh at the ADHD kids, or even they don't respect that, we think that we think it's the right time in the classroom to teach the kids how to be respectful. And if the kids really graduate and go out to society, no one will actually teach them, and we think it will even worsen the problem of discrimination. Therefore, we think that fixing it in the classroom is the right place to go. But even if, why do you think that not having this that discussion is harmful, because when you just use the medical model, what you're trying to do is you think that everything is medicated. You think that everything can be fixed by medicine. Why is it problematic? First of all, you neglect the root cause of the problem. For instance, when you are dealing with an ADHD kid, you think that giving him medicine could cure the problem, but then you may ignore the underscene of what the child has been facing. For instance, maybe the child is grown up in a domestic abuse family, or the parents are have a severe there are family issues that this child have been undergoing. Therefore, we think that the under root cause of the problem has been neglected. And how will these ADHD kids be better under our side is that people won't perceive them as different. People will just perceive them as kids that are slightly more active, and we can see that there are still kids that are more willing to play with them. But under their side, the kids will be demonized and will be labelized as something as an alien or as someone that I don't want to play with. Therefore, we think that's really bad. Secondly, they talk about, moving on to my argument, why I believe that is in the interest of this movement work. Ladies and gentlemen, we think that in the society there are already a lot of medical resources and facilities that are being characterized that have been helping disabled people. However, what this disabled community really need is the mental well-being and how they could really opt into the society. I think that's the part that the disabled rights community has been failing to help these people. Why? Because first of all, when you are trying to use the medical model, all the problems that these disabled people face will be trivialized into individual matter instead of a systematic barrier. They will try to put the blame on the individuals, but we think it is unjust to put the blame on these individuals, because for these, maybe they have because of birth lottery, they do not consent to the physical condition that they have. For instance, if they're injured, they are already severely traumatic, and we don't think that they should be undergoing this kind of blame by the society. Therefore, first of all, we think that the medical model is unjust. We shouldn't give medicine to mental health to people with mental illness and think that that's the way to go. We think that that's a horrific society that they're living in. But more importantly, the majority under their model is even reluctant to help these disabled communities. How so? Because under their model, the majority think that they are the normal people, and they are the ones who will sacrifice the right to enforce policy changes that could help this minority. We think that under their side, it will trickle down a lot more majority backlash or a negative social perception towards these people. But how under our side will be better? First of all, we think that when we try to how do we increase the social change? First of all, we think that under our side, the disabled people will be more likely and will be more able to voice out themselves and also to garner. We think that under our world we have a more collective airtime and collective agenda that could improve the mental well-being of these people. Secondly, we think that under our side, when problems are seen as an industrial problem, for instance, in the K-pop industry, there are so many idols that commit suicide or have mental issues. But then under their side, people will just think that, okay, you have problem, you take those depression medicine, and people no problem with that. But under our side, we will be able to look at the root cause of this problem. For instance, we will go in to check whether there will be where is a necessity to undergo industrial reform. We are able to check whether these idols, they have been working overtime and also their mental well-being. We think that all these policies will not be able to happen under their side. But even if it is able to happen, we think that it will create more majority backlash, because they will be put in a very polarized position, and we think that that's not going to help these disabled individuals. So more importantly, we think that under our side, I talked to you, first of all, we think that under our side, we're able to create a more airtime for these disabled individuals. Secondly, we create a platform for people to reach out and to seek help. And thirdly, we also create policies that could help and improve the well-being of these people. That's why we're very proud to oppose.
So I want to quickly clarify some things that I think opening opposition opened up with, and I also feel it's clearly a little bit unfair. The fact that, they bring up this example of K-pop idols that are committing suicide because of stress and pressure from work. But I think that's really unfair because of the fact that if we were to classify everyone that is under stress and is feeling under pressure, I think that this would actually open the debate to every single person being a disabled person. And it's not actually fair because we are also talking about the disabled movement. Now, I also want to talk about this assumption that opening opposition comes up with, where they say, like, look, we're going to trivialize this. Let me quickly clarify a couple of things, what we're doing. The disability movement, what we're trying to push for is the fact that there is a certain degree of where people socially should help them. But the fact is that we think the majority of responsibility should actually come from disabled people. Now let me explain to you a little bit where this problem comes out from. My previous speaker was talking about this idea of a person being isolated because they have a mental issue, right? For example, let's say you can't control yourself, but you have outbursts where you flip tables, right? And you have everyone that comes and sees this big problem of what you're doing. And you're asking everyone to say, it's okay, he's mentally disabled, he can flip the table, we just need to bear with him. But let's be more realistic in this case, right? Would you actually be friends with someone who flips tables in the drop of a hat, or would you probably try to say, hey, that guy's kind of weird, wait, that guy's kind of weird. I'd rather be friends with someone that is more stable, than someone that is easier to actually communicate, and I don't have to worry or put the burden of myself to worry about this person, right? So this kind of brings you to the cycle of what exactly happens to this disabled person. They get to this cycle of self-blame, saying that, no one wants to be friends with me because it's my fault, because like at the end of the day, I'm the problem, right? It's kind of saying like, what's wrong with me? And we want to point out the thing where the second problem is that you're also forcing society to accommodate you, which is, I also feel that what happens is it actually negatively happens, the disability movement, because of the fact that there's an expectation of people to do things for you, right? It's like, oh, why aren't you helping me? There needs to be a certain kind of responsibility of you actually being self-dependent and responsible for your own actions. Okay? I also want to talk about a couple of...
Hang on, sir.
Okay, sure.
So how could this disabled community really have a healthy mental well-being if they keep on blaming themselves for their own disabilities under your paradigm?
So, can you repeat that?
How could these disabled individuals really be healthy if they, under your side, they would just keep on blaming themselves? It's their own fault that they lose their leg or they have depression?
Okay, so to clarify one more thing of how mental depression actually, how medication comes into relation to this. The medication is not to actually cure the mental issue. It's to help you transition, right? It's help to make you control, give you a bit more control. To actually, it's a short-term fix which actually helps you to lower these certain outbursts or these certain things where you can't actually control yourself, but be able to have enough control to take actions or to act in an appropriate manner. Obviously, it's not going to be an immediate fix. I take it, I'm completely going to be fine, but it might give you some more form of control of, let's say, ADHD, where your mind's running 300 miles per second. It might slow your mind to come down and say, hey, look at the situation, look at what you're feeling. Maybe you can think about trying to calm down. You have enough time to transition from this problem. Why is this important? It just helps you give temporary control so that in the long term you can adapt and change your mindset and also be able to lower the amount of medication you have in order to fit better into society in this mental aspect. Yes, I'll take it.
Whatever you just said, whatever example you named, is exactly showing social stigma, exclusion, and unempathy, which we don't teach even our kids, let alone people in the world. Would you say that you're willing to tolerate, you and your society, the governmental side, is willing to tolerate murderers, rapists, people all around the world, but not a disabled child, not teaching kids empathy, not adjusting social change and social people to people, but to everybody else except the people who are disabled?
Okay, I also want to talk about like we're not trying saying that social society is completely ignoring how the saying, oh, don't just disregard people being disabled. I don't think that's exactly what we're saying. What we're trying to say is that there is a certain degree where you need to take self-responsibility to be better and not have this image of everyone needs to cater to my disability, and that is what we don't want to do. We want to show people that yes, we are struggling, but we are also trying to do everything in our power to actually help ourselves. Now the other point is socially, how does socially actually help this idea of where you're trying to say that, oh, government's going to help people. And now we have this example of where in the US, lots of people are becoming homeless because they have these severe mental illness. They're getting kicked out of their house, they're getting kicked out of institution, and what they actually need is some medical help in order so that they can function better into society. And that's the thing, right? The idea of saying like, oh, everyone's going to adapt to them and we're going to help them socially, or government's going to help them in this way. But we have seen examples of this failing where government just cannot actually, government cannot actually help these people who aren't actually adapting into society, or were brought up with, that were being ignored, but weren't given the chance to actually try to help fix themselves, or try to help them to, fit better into society. And this is the idea. Was that double ring?
No.
Okay.
Sorry.
So this is what we also agree. The idea of their side saying, oh, they also, open opposition also points out that these people that have mental disease, the mental illnesses, will be demonized and alienated. And we agree with that, right? This other idea of, they say, domestic abuse, right? Where people are being traumatized, right? The idea is saying, okay, so what exactly are you trying to say in terms of people that are being traumatized, where they get to situations and they have these extreme anxiety attacks, right? That what they should play out these anxiety attacks and have a meltdown in the middle room. There are medications to calm you down, to have more control over what your situation is, or whatever the situation at that time. So in order to learn to deal and actually fix that step into being traumatized. My point is that you need medical help to actually adapt to fit in and be accepted in the long term. Okay, thank you.
Mr. Speaker, it is never the opening opposition stance to deny the function of medical and medical science, right? We say that medicine still has its function in helping persons with disabilities. But what is the crux of today's debate is to focus on what the disability rights movement wants, right? They want to advance disability rights, they want to achieve equality, they want to remove discrimination, and they want policy changes. But what is side-opening government bringing us today with a medical model is that it constantly deems people with disability as deviant, abnormal, and hence need to be rectified and cured by medical intervention or surgery. It highlights the problem being on the person with disability himself or herself, and it is how pernicious it is. So I really offer you with one substantive argument to extend the case of my partner, which is medical model is demeaning to persons with disability. Because the moment you start calling persons with disabilities as patients under the medical model, you start to label them as disabled, deviant, and should be cured. And hence, the majority needs to accommodate these people who are deviant from the majority of the people. The narrative is very pernicious because the narrative is that the majority needs to sacrifice their own right to help the deviant people. It is very demeaning. The reality is that although we accept that medical and medical science does have some help for persons with disability, some disabilities simply cannot be cured or rectified. For example, you have lost your legs, right? So these people whose disability can never be rectified or can never be cured will constantly be deemed to be deviant from society. For example, transgender people will constantly be labeled as persons suffering from gender dysphoria, a form of psychiatric disability, and hence they need to change instead of being accepted, and they are forever being discriminated. The second impact is that the majority incentive to assist these people will also decrease, because now that the majority don't feel that they are ones who create a society that actually harms the majority, the minority, the persons with disability. They don't feel that they need to accommodate for the minority that much, right? Because they don't feel that they are actually committing a wrongdoing in framing the society in a way that is so inconvenient and so harmful and so detrimental to the persons with disability. The third impact is that the disabled people will less likely to seek help because they are seen as deviant and feel the discrimination in society against them. And hence many people with mental illness and hence people with depression will more likely hide behind the scenes and not seek medical help. The problem is that there will also be a less critical mass in society to advocate policy changes when they are less visible to society as a visible group to society. And hence we think that it is very pernicious. How does our social model solve this? We say the social model puts the right blame to societal organization, telling the society that even if you are the majority, it does not mean that you are correct. Instead, you are actually contributing to a social structure that is so harmful and so obstructive to disabled people and preventing them from achieving self-actualization. It is the society fault as a whole that causes this. And even if you are the minority, it does not mean that you are deviant in society, but because the majority has committed a mistake in making you uncomfortable. So 3 impacts by this. The first impact is that it incentivizes the public to provide more accommodation because now the public feel that they have the moral responsibility to help people with disabilities when they feel that they are actually committing a wrongdoing by shaping society in a way that is so detrimental to persons with disability and so obstructive for persons with disability to achieve discrimination. The second thing is that it creates less discrimination because the majority feel that they are the ones who are in the wrong instead of the disability, persons with disability in the deviance. And the third impact is that we encourage the persons with disability to seek help more likely because now that they are not seen as deviant, but instead they are seen that it is a society that caused them such inconvenience, they are more likely to stand up to fight against the unfair social structure that is working against them. And hence we think that it is very important to the disability rights movement because we need more people to support the disability rights movement. So we need we need to enlarge the critical mass to stand up to fight against the unfair social structure. Yes.
Right, so on our side, what we are doing is we're providing resources for people to actually change to get better. And so what we say is that society will look at these people and say that they're working to improve themselves, while on your side of the house, the greater part of society is just going to look at people and say, we have to change, but they're not even trying.
Well, the very example that you raised in your speech is that we have our buildings remodeled, so we have some ramps and instead of social staircases that prevents persons with disability from walking past. It's a precise example of social modeling, right? It is because that the majority has created staircases that obstructs persons with disabilities from entering and getting access to the buildings, and hence we create ramps and change the social structure. It is an example that is in favor of our side of the house. While in your side of the house, what you need to say, what you're saying that is that it is the fault of the disabled person because you lose your leg, right? So it is you are being the deviant and minority, and hence you have to have a plastic leg in order to walk into our staircase, and you create inconvenience and a force in medical change upon the persons with disability, and you are the ones that actually disadvantage the persons with disabilities more. So another example raised by the side opening opposition is that, well, kids are not going to be understanding, and hence we should, not accommodate. We should actually provide medicines to kids with ADHD, so on and so forth, right? However, if you continue to highlight the kid as deviant and need medical intervention, you're continuously labeling the kid as outcast, and it is the ADHD kid himself being deviant, right? We think that it actually entrenches discrimination against ADHD people, and hence telling the ADHD people that they are the persons who need to change themselves out of time. They are the people who need to change instead of the majority who need to be more accepting. We think that it is disadvantageous to the disability rights movement as a whole because it is demeaning to the disability rights, the community of the disabilities, right? The second problem is that we think that when kids are not understanding that they need to accept ADHD kids, it is best that we educate them to accept differences instead of making the ADHD kid to be the same as other kids, because that's where discrimination begins, right? We need to learn to make the kids to understand that there are people who are differences, right? So they need to accept differences instead of make differences the same, right? So that the moment where you need to change difference and make it into the same as the majority is the moment where you discriminate against people who are different in society, and it is pernicious to the kids' education as a whole. So at the end of the opening opposition case, please take away one important idea. society. The entire medical model is demeaning to society, demeaning to community of disability, because it constantly tells people that it is the disability people who need to change in order to accommodate society rather than the other way around. Thank you.
Sorry. That concludes the opening exchange. Member of Government, whenever you're ready.
I'll start my speech in 3, 2, 1. I'll first identify types of people in social movements. There are people who are already joining in the social movements, and there are people that are moderatists, and there are people who are against the social movements. For people who are already in the social movement, they agree on the topic. But for moderatists, if we focus on the medical model, it's more intuitive for people to understand. But if we focus on social models, it needs more time for understanding, and so it's more likely for moderatists to relate with their medical models instead of social models. And this will give them incentives to join the social movement, and we can bring the social society together, and more people will support. But people who are against the movement, they might just be more angry if we focus on the social models, because they might think we are blaming them as a group. So they might also go on extremes, and the social movements will not be expected to do the things that it should be. And second one can focus on, if we focus on the social model, we are focusing on how the disabilities interact with the society. But we neglect a type of disabilities where they live in nursing homes for decades, and they live for hospital for decades. Yes, sure.
In the short term, you may attract a group of moderate to understand under medical model because they are more intuitive to relate. But how can you make sure that they can sustain and to help and to support the movement in the long run? This is what you have to address.
Okay. Because this gives the moderates the incentives to learn about what disabilities need. So as disabilities, they are enduring a lot of medical disabilities and mental disabilities. Moderates will see them, and they will want to learn more about it in the long run.
Good.
Thank you. And focus on, so if we focus on a social model, we will neglect the type of disabilities where they live in hospitals or nursing homes for decades. So if for these kind of disabilities, we focus on their social models, it's no use because they do not actually interact with the society because they live in the hospitals. So we should emphasize on the medical models because this will enable them to interact with the society. This will give them the resources they need to interact with the society.
Okay, so my question is, what do we do with things that are for A, incurable, and then B, what do we do when they've tried everything? Every single resource has been exhausted, it's not curable, it's not solvable. Do we ignore these people, or do we adapt them to the society, or do we let them die? What do we do with them?
Yes, for these kind of cases, this is like, for example, cancer, or these type of things. So we need social movement to put attention on this more, because medical improvement, it takes decades to make a new improvement, and it needs resources from the government to invest in these improvements. The social movements and politicians, they focus on voting. They want to know what people are thinking. So if we use social movements as a means to address their needs, the politicians will actually think the social movement as more important and really think what people need is medical. This will actually help the people who are incurable because the government and the scientists will want to invest in the medical improvements. Yes.
So from your response, I gather that you agree with our side. The social movements are more important than the medical movements.
No, I mean, like, my meaning is because in the medical model, it needs more time to invest in improvements. So if we focus on the medical model, this actually gives the politicians and governments and the scientists incentives to look into what they can improve. Okay. And I'll continue with the people who are not able to interact with society. And if the social movement we focus on society model, what the society will perceive this message. It will think that, not only they are forced to admit them, but people with disabilities are on the pedestal and they have to put people with disabilities in their lives. So this will actually make a more unfair circumstances, and this responds to the opening opposition. And another thing that the opening opposition did not put into consideration is the second harm that will cause of the disabilities. Because in social movements, there are a lot of media and probably a lot of police. There will be a lot of... Yes, sir.
So previously you said how it's very important to create social change, especially for people who are dealing with cancer and very serious diseases. But now you're saying that it's other people who have to pedestal around people with disabilities. Could you decide?
Okay, and I'll continue with the second part. And because like people who are who have mental disabilities, they are, if we focus on this as social movements, they are forced to speak out their stories in front of mass media. And we are not sure if the media will portray this as positive and negative. And media, they want views, so they're more likely to stigmatize them and put them in a negative position where their needs will not be actually seen. So this will cause second harm to the mental disabilities because they are forced to speak in front of media and a lot of people.
Ladies and gentlemen, before I begin my speech, I would just like to rebut a couple of the arguments the closing government has made, as well as reframe the debate according to what the opening government has said. First of all, I want to remark that it seems like the closing government is not quite sure what side they are representing, as they have agreed time and time again to our points. They have mentioned that the issue of what if we cannot cure the disease we are talking about, the disability we are talking about, as mentioned by the POI from my speaker. What will we do? What are we left with? What is said that we are left with is that social movements are meant to take on this task, right? That's what the closing government has said. Closing government has said. Social movements are meant to focus on this. Okay, who is talking here in this debate? We are talking about disability movement. It is a social movement we are speaking for right now. Of course they are meant to tackle this task. That is exactly the argument we are making. We need this disability movement to tackle this task. Otherwise, what are the disabled people left with? Next up, they also mentioned that putting disabled people in a pedestal is an issue, which once again is an issue, a social issue. It is not a medical issue. It is an issue in the way society has stigmatized disabled people and thus needs to be tackled in a social way and not in a medical way. To add on top of that, the opening government had mentioned this kind of sob story about the child that no one wants to be friends with, and what we need to do about that is to have them be looked at in a more medical way, right? Because if we teach the kids the issues, not now, I'll take you later. If we teach the kids issues about why that person is disabled, only exactly then people will not want to be friends with them. Does that actually make sense to you, everyone? Ladies and gentlemen, just take a moment to think about this. If you're in a classroom and you find out that there's a child and out of nowhere they have outbursts and you don't know why, would you choose to be friends with them without knowing what the issue is? Or would you be friends with them knowing that they are struggling, knowing that putting a little bit of empathy in your life? I feel like that makes a lot more sense to all of us. And one final point I want to make from the opening government is that they have mentioned that in this university there are ramps, there are elevators, there are different aspects that help people with disability live, right? And that we need to focus on that. We need to focus on medical aspects. These not medical aspects. These are social issues. These are by law defined as social inclusion laws, issues that are taken by society and not in the medical field. So thank you again, once again, the opening government for agreeing with us. Now I just want to bring an extension from our side, as we do agree with the opening proposition, but we just want to show you another perspective that is even better and even more convincing. What I would like to argue, in a second, is that if we do prioritize the medical model, this creates a sort of harmful structural incentives that reorients resource allocation in a way that permanently harms disabled people. Let me just explain this for a little bit more. If we prioritize medical causes in this movement, the disabled movement, what will happen is that governments, bigger corporations will start to deprioritize accessibility, anti-discrimination laws, reforms, all things that are very, very important to disabled people to live every single day, because they will see disability as something that can be solved at some point medically. So, okay, let's take their position, for example. Okay, we'll look at it in a medical way, we'll focus on medicine. What if out of nowhere you find out that this medical condition, this disability cannot be cured, cannot reach a cure whatsoever? What will you do if you have not worked on this socially, if you have not created a society that accepts the people for their disabilities? Will you let them struggle in their day-to-day lives, because at some point we will focus on medical advances that will help the disabled people? Again, I just see unethical ideas being spread out here. Let me continue moving on with my argument. Okay, I'll take you now before I continue.
So in terms of this incurable cure stuff, if we're looking at social movements, and if we focus on medical issues, then we can draw more funding that can lead to actual more research that can lead to potential cures. While if you're just focusing on the social issue and not the medical side, you don't get that advantage.
Thank you. Again, I would like to highlight, as every single one of the previous speakers have said, we do not say that we don't want to focus on medical issues whatsoever. We do think medical advancements have to be made. However, this movement specifically needs to focus on the social aspects, because medicine will never be perfect. You will never be able to cure everything. No matter how much funding you have, no matter how long the researchers sit in the lab to try to find a cure, some diseases cannot be cured. We will not reach that point, and we all know this. So how about we make sure that these people can live every day-to-day life instead of making them struggle through basic tasks? Now let's look at this cure aspect once again. If hypothetically we focus on medical issues and there is a cure, what if people cannot afford this? How are we going to make sure that the disabled people are going to be able to afford these costs, these medical costs that will let them live their day-to-day life? In your model, if we don't focus on the social issues, that will let them be able to afford this, that will let them be able to cure themselves medically, as you have stated. So that is why, according to my arguments and my perspective, the impact, if we do not focus on social issues, will lead to complete systemic exclusion for these disabled people, because there is some sort of cure that will come out one day, according to the proposition side, which once again will lead to extreme inequality and completely inhumane and unethical results. Thank you.
Opposition, now inviting member of government.
Government wait. You said member of government.
Right, government will try. I'm on very little sleep. Yes, whenever you're ready.
Okay, so my speech in figure 1. So the root cause of this motion is that, the question of the motion is that who can solve the root cause? From the God side, we are saying that the disease, no matter from the physically or mentally or the socially health, is the root cause. And the outside saying that the root cause is how social awareness, how social perceive these things. However, and the OG saying that medical model can cure the people and solve the problems, especially for example for those like mental illness in a class like ADHD students. And from the all saying that okay, we can change how people perceive this, and we can educate people and let the pressure or the stress of the society make those disabled less stressed and less sensitive to what the conditions they are having. For example, for like the K-pop suicide case. And from CG, we are seeing that mental model is more intuitive, that people can be aware, can be accepted by the majority, and the social movement can success. And we are emphasizing that medical improvement is the root solution for this root cause, and we can and in the long term, now we can make those disabled people be cured, and we have a better society. And still saying that some disease cannot be cured, and some disease, even if we found the medicines, that maybe people cannot be affordable. However, from my side, we are focusing on more long-term benefits for this society, for the human beings. So even though it is really expensive that we put efforts on in the medical model of disability, we still think that in the long term we should put more emphasis on this. We should fund money. We should give more fund and resources to cure these problems. Why? Because when we see from like 40 years ago or 50 years ago some disease, we see that cannot be cured, and we think that it is impossible, like cancer, like AIDS. However, for now, some cancers can be cured, and the AIDS they can prolong the people's life. So it's better for us for the long-term benefits. It's better for us to put more emphasis on the medical model, and that is the root cause, and that is the root solution for this motion. And why social model cannot work here? We are not saying that we are prioritizing the medical model rather than the social model, because medical model is more root cause, and the social model is not that effective for the long term of the human beings.
So the intuitive understanding that you're creating is just fear, because people tend to avoid people that are sick because they don't know who they are. So how can you make sure that these moderate groups will actually join your movement and support you?
Okay. When this intuitive movement and advocacy in this society, that people that is peaceful and that to like arouse people empathy, that more like government resources or more network and more like fund that will help to cure the medical problems. And we want to like further extend what the OG saying that okay, the health conditions include the physically, like mentally, and socially. So the social awareness that could only like cure the social health, that could only arouse people's awareness. However, you cannot solve the problems that the physical or mental illness that is can be cured by the medical surgery or other things. That is harder for us to do so. So people from the opposition side that okay, we can the root cause is the discrimination. However, if we solve the discrimination, now we cannot solve any problems here. Only if the people with the disease, with the disabled, that can be cured, that can be changed, then the real change happens. And one thing that opposition side cannot bring up is that don't you think that if you are only focused on the social awareness, that you are neglecting the real difference of the people? Like people with autism, they are really different from the normal people, and they are discriminating by this society. And with the medicine treatment, the people can be cured. They can become better and be back to the normal society. So the main part is that okay. We always educate people like to embrace them and to make them like very inclusive. However, the real change is that we can make people be normal again, no matter from the mental health or other.
The very fact that society is already building a lot of ramps instead of staircases to buildings, does it not already prove that social model is working and intuitive to people on the ground?
Sorry.
The very fact that society is already building a lot of ramps instead of staircases to buildings to allow persons with disabilities to access, does it not prove that social model is actually working and intuitive to people on the ground?
Okay. The social model is actually working, however, from the long-term part, that we need more resources to fund, just like you said, some diseases cannot be cured, some situations cannot be changed in the short term. So those physical things are already exist. However, from our side, we are seeing that as a long-term benefits, and that is more impactful to like focus on the medical, focus on the medical model for the proposal.
Opposition with
I'll start my speech in 3, 2, 1. Respected opposition and proposition, my name is Navnesh Krishna. I'll be the weak speaker of the opposition team on the topic of this House as disability rights movement would prioritize a medical model over a social model of disability in their advocacy. So we're standing here and talking about a very, very certain topic where, as we agree with that the medical cure should be found, but also we are talking about the social impact that it has and why we should focus on social change when the cure is not found, when the change is not possible, when we want to make things right. Okay? So I'll start with kind of whipping each house individually, and then I'll move on to the general clashes. As for the opening government, they want to change, they think that we shouldn't accommodate the whole society to certain people, but they're not speaking how we're making literal medical cures for certain diseases. So if we're making cures for diseases, why not make people for people and create these people, teach them mechanisms where they would be more empathetic, tolerant, and loving to other people without any need for additional influencing them and additional conditioning to them. So he says almost no changes will be made socially, but medically it will. This is a generalization that we do not appreciate. And then he says, once again, ramps are social, ramps and elevators are social inclusion factors given by law in every country according to that is recognized by the United Nations. If you're wanting to be also part of the European Union, this is also in the same dictionary. When it comes to social stigma that your second speaker gave, it's absolutely brutal for me to even comment on it, because the examples he gave were people being in the classrooms, people being excluded, which is exactly what we're fighting about. Social disability awareness is exactly about fighting these social stigmas and about stopping kids from sitting on another bench solely because you're not feeling comfortable to sit next to them. Why? Because it's foreign to you. Why? Because you're not educated. Why? Because nobody educated you. Why? Because we didn't offer the solution yet, but we now have the solution and we are proposing it proudly, where you're trying to oppose it. We say, nobody says that everything is left to us. Obviously, we're fighting for the medical cure as well, but we're fighting for the social change, for the social impact, for the well-better. So, when it comes to opening opposition, my speaker did most of the rebuttaling for you guys, which is why I'm whipping you here, because my speaker did more than you guys did, in a way where it's like she said everything. Medicine is implemented successfully, she did not focus on the gay rights, which you don't think is ready for this debate, and also, she said that neglect makes cost and makes it terrible. So, good arguments on your side, we really appreciate it, but we have extensions from my speaker, who was absolutely amazing and gave extensions that are still holding to this end of the debate, have not been rebutted by first or second speaker, nor anybody before. When it comes to the clashes of this debate has three crucial clashes. Clash number one is what actually improves the quality of life for disabled people. So, on government side, these people are going to solve disabilities and live a normal life. First of all, this term is absolutely abnormal to me, normal life, but okay. Solve disability, okay, equals normal life. Most disabilities cannot be cured. They can be accommodated, first of all, by definition. Second of all, even when they are, even when they're cured, they're taking a long time and they're dedicating their life to it and it's going through it. So, why this is true? Because we need really immediate benefits such as inclusion, employment, laws, education, inclusion factor of employment in the accessible institutions, and then impact would be independence, dignity, and equality for these people, which is what we're fighting for today. Equality, independence, and accessibility, and dignity for these people. Which is what we all, in this debate, agree is common sense here. Even the government sides agree with us that these people do deserve dignity, accommodation, accessibility, and everything, but they agree on it politically. They agree not socially, no, economically. So when it comes to clash 2, resource allocation, prioritizing medically, like we are seeing that people are funding and putting money into it. So they're drawing attention away from structural changes that are going to be long term, which is not your extension, it is our extension. That we are finding a long-term solution because not everything can be cured now. Not everything, not now. Not everything, not now, which is why exactly we're offering a long-term solution and you guys are not. We're offering inclusion for future generation and increased progress, which is the exact impact. It's also important to mention that private sectors and public sectors both invest money into financial incentives to change these things and to help these people. So we put, for example, but not every time the execution is perfect. So we put, for example, a lot of tax money into medical assistance, but not everybody has a psychiatrist, let alone a wheelchair. So let's say that, okay, not every system is perfect, but we're taking it at your best value, that this is completely functional. But yet again, not everything can be cured. So even at your best value, you guys still fail to go against our inclusion, accessibility, and dignity argument. When it comes to second clash, why this is true? Policymakers have finite budgets. So when the budgets run out, what the hell do we do? Whereas the empathy and the respect we create is remaining forever and ever, and the next generation after us, my kids are going to be learning how to treat people with respect. Whereas your kids are going to learn how, okay, we'll cure them, we'll fix them, we'll make them normal, because this is what they should be taught. This is not what they should be taught. Everybody should be taught empathy. So secondly, why this is true? If medical is the only solution, my speaker already said this, there's no need to build any beef. Like politicians can say, okay, we are curing the diseases. We are curing the diseases, guys. We are not going to build infrastructure. We're not going to build education. We're not going to build buildings. Nothing. Why? Because we are focusing on this and this only. We are curing disabilities. We're using our tax dollar money to this. Nothing else in our life. Because it's a crucial problem. We need to fix it. Third of all, why this is safe. Why this is true. Money focused instead of access to inclusion and accessibility is completely not covered by your side, and then accessibility stagnates, which creates weight and structural harm. I don't have time, I'm sorry. Structural harm is something that you guys are not covering. You're not structurally assigned to this. So, third clash, who gets left behind? Government. Everyone benefits from medical evidence and medical inclusion. Okay, but we on our side are saying that who gets left behind? All these people who cannot afford to be in the system, who are not in blue. For example, these innovations enter society unevenly, which is, we saw uneven inclusion of these resources. My speaker gave all these extensions already, so I'm just re-explaining them. If you enter the society unevenly, they're not going to be evenly distributed. So poor people, for example, Global South, will be disabled communities that will not have any access to what you guys are giving them, whereas the empathy is free and we're trying to teach these people these mechanisms. Impact is that you'll be creating two-tier citizenship where rich become fixable. We can fix them and make them normal, but poor cannot be fixed. And they do not deserve to be normal. They deserve to be frowned upon and looked sideways because you guys are proposing it. Wait, magnitude majorities help and harm, and the harm did not help. Whereas moral calculus is that this is causing inequality and antisocial benefits. Whereas, given all that I've already rebutted from our side, given all that I've rebutted and whipped all these 3 houses, given all 3 clashes I've given you, and given all the extension my speaker has given you, I think that closing a position purely wins this debate. Thank you very much.
Debate is possible. And